Today on the Coach Y podcast, we have a coach who ran for Truett-McConnell University, where he was a standout runner for the track and cross country teams. He then found himself as a volunteer assistant coach at University of North Georgia, and now he's the head cross country coach at Agnes Scott College. Today, we welcome Coach Seth Ledford to the Coach Y podcast.
With the world of coaching evolving and the carousel always changing, we're going to sit down with some coaches and we're going to figure out what they coach, how they coach, and most importantly, why they got into this profession. My name is Kason Wilkinson, and I am your host of the Coaches Y podcast.
That was my Coaches Y.
Welcome back to another Coaches Y podcast. We have a very, very special guest in the building today. We have Coach Seth Ledford, head cross country coach from Agnes Scott College. Coach, how you doing today?
I'm good, Kason. How are you?
I'm doing well. I appreciate you jumping on here today. I know we talked a little bit a few weeks ago, actually, to get this thing set up. So I do appreciate you keeping me on the schedule and fitting me in today.
Hey, it's the very least I can do, man. I appreciate the opportunity.
Of course, man. Of course. How did season end up going for you? And I know that you guys are transitioning to the indoor season and things like that, or just in general, you guys are in indoor now. So how did cross country go, and what does the indoor season look like for you guys as you guys are heading into that, or involved in that part of the year?
For sure. We ran our regional meet, and we had the fastest time in school history combined, which was super cool for us. We had a couple of top performances, and the best thing about all of it is that you sort of saw the peaking process come to effect, with 3 of our girls out of our 5 performers setting personal records in the 6K. So that was huge. Looking forward to indoor season. We don't have much of an indoor season because we don't have an official track team. We've got a couple of individual competitors. So that'll start here we'll start back in January for indoor-outdoor season.
Gotcha. Okay. I see. Did not know you guys didn't have an official track team, but that's fair. I usually like to start these episodes off with you talking a little bit and passing the reins over to you before we dive into the coaching side of things. So if you don't mind letting me know a little bit about who you are, for one, but kind of where you grew up, and then when you got involved in the sport of running and any other sports, if you did have a chance of playing those as well.
Yeah, for sure. So a little bit about me. I started running, I guess, whenever I was 8 years old, 9 years old. So I've been in sport my entire life. Both of my parents were athletes. My mom was a college basketball player. My dad played tennis in high school. But then 2006 rolled around and my mom got diagnosed with breast cancer. So whenever she won the battle, so that's huge. Praise God for that.
Yeah, huge for sure. Congratulations. And hopefully she's doing well all these years later.
Yes, she is over almost 20 years cancer-free, so that is huge. But she started triathlon training after that, has done 5 or 6 triathlons. My mom is a beast. So that being said, that got us into a family sport of running. We would go to the track and mom would be running around the track and we would be on our bikes, or mom would be running on the track and dad would be pacing her. We would be in the back of my dad's Avalanche and we would be screaming at her through the sunroof. That was what started sport for us. Yeah. And so as we continued on, I played sports, basketball, football, baseball, tapped my foot in everything. But then whenever I was 10 years old, I did my first 5K. And the middle school cross-country coach came out and said, "Have you ever thought about running?" And I said, "No, didn't even know that was a thing. So this is cool." Started there, went to high school, and got my first coaching experience in high school. We were down a lot of members for our track team, so I stepped in as a interim high jump coach. I didn't know anything about high jump, but figured it out real quick. Which is also where I met my wife at, because I was her first coach for high jump. Okay. So that was an awesome experience. She's an incredible athlete. She was a D2 basketball player. And then I went to college and ran cross country, but dipped my toes in the water for everything. from the speed walk to the marathon to decathlon. I tried everything out in college because we needed points for track. And I just love being on the track. So that's what got me into college running. And then post-college, I took a job in higher ed doing housing, which is an awesome experience and taught me that coaching is definitely more than putting the numbers together. It's about the people. It's about understanding the athletes that you have and developing the relationship with them so that they will want to run for you. They will want to perform, and they need to understand the best that they can be. So that job took me there, but never really stopped coaching. At one point, I had 81 student employees under me, and they looked at me all the time and was like, "Oh no, you're just a coach and a housing person." And so took that. A job came open down in Agnes Scott, and I took my shot, and here we are. I feel like running hasn't ever left. It's always been the back burner. I've been doing something, or I've been training someone since I was 16, 17 years old. And so the opportunity to do that now full time, that's my job. This is the life I love to live. And this is what I get to do every day is just a blessing.
That's awesome, man. So to kind of start off with, like I said, congratulations on your mom and her success of overcoming that. And, obviously for you mentioning how you kind of dabbled in everything. I have two things off of that. One, speed walking is crazy. I've seen obviously all the videos, right? The first time I really saw as like a jokingly thing was in the movie Are We Done Yet? Back with Ice Cube, and I thought that was crazy. So you have to keep one foot on the ground the entire time, but they walk crazy fast. So respect to you there, because that's probably very technical, even though it's kind of not gonna lie, kind of weird, but it's super technical. And obviously it's a sport that only certain people can do very well, right? So fair. And then you mentioned about so you got to run in college. So where did you compete at in college?
Truett McConnell University in Cleveland, Georgia.
Cleveland, Georgia. Okay. So what was your recruiting process like, right? So I know you mentioned now here's the thing, right? So I know in other sports, right? Football, baseball, basketball, these sports that you've mentioned that you got to play. But just in general, a lot of those are, even in my sports, wrestling, a lot of it's a visual sport, right? From the coaches. They have to visually see if this kid can compete at this level, whatever their metrics are. But as a track, swimming, cross country, right? You have marks that you can hit that kind of can see where you sit. So was your time in was your time in high school or times, I don't know exactly what you got recruited for, but was it a mark that fit Truett, or was it just one of those things that everything felt good to you to go there, right? So I guess what kind of answer it in those two parts, what was the recruiting process like, and what was the thing in high school that kind of let you know that you could compete at that next level?
Absolutely. Great questions. I think that the beginning piece for that is that I wasn't an outstanding athlete. I wasn't a stellar athlete. Everyone can go look at every time that I've ever run in mile split. You can go back in the databases there. But whenever I started looking, I got recruited by a couple of small colleges in the area. And I went and toured there. I went and met their coaches, and those places just did not feel right. There was another small Christian university that I looked into. I had contacted, and a lot of the recruiting came from my end because I wasn't the most stellar athlete. We had a championship winning team, which was one of the most incredible experiences. My senior year of high school, we won state and set a record in the lowest amount of points scored to the state title in that time. I think it's been broken since, but we came through and we had our top 5, which are our scores in cross country, were all in the top 15. Which was truly incredible. It was an awesome experience. So that put our team on the map, but they were still looking at R1, R2, and I came through at R3 and R4. So I had to do a lot of the recruiting process. which is just down my alley. I like to do the work. I like to understand how do you really get to the point that you want to go. But so all of that to be said is that I looked at really I was looking at religious schools in the area that I could maybe compete at. I wasn't dead set to run at a D1 level. I had a couple of conversations with Kennesaw State, which is a smaller D1 school. But I knew that that wasn't sort of the direction I was headed. And I wanted an education that was founded in Christ. So I went and looked at Emmanuel University, which was 15 minutes from my house. It was great. The coach was nice. And then I went to Truett McConnell after emailing their coach, and we had set it up. And Truett just felt like it was right. The whole experience, the on-campus experience, the people that I met while I was there, the athletes that I met, everything just fell in line. And I'm still in touch with a lot of those athletes. The guy that taught me how to pole vault, he and I are still very close. My college roommates are still very close. So Truett was just the right fit. And really after it took a lot of prayer and a lot of trying to understand where I was supposed to be. And the answer was Truett McConnell. So I don't know if a time was really it. They were definitely lucky to recruit me is what the coach told me. I wasn't anything stellar, but it was definitely just a fit and a God thing.
So as you were mentioning, for one of the coolest things is whenever you get to kind of set maybe new marks for it, whether state or school, right? I personally think so. Like, I know my senior year, we actually set a few different bars as a senior. We set at the time the highest point scored at the wrestling tournament of our school history. Might have been ever in the state. I don't know if that was it, but I know for sure at our school, every single person except for one placed. So that was 13 out of 14 kids placed, and then the next year got broke. Everybody placed there, so that was cool to see. But that was a fun piece for me to say that we were the original OGs of that, breaking the record. And then, that senior year also, our track team still to this day is the only track team to win a state title at my high school. So every once in a while when I go back, I get to see that on the thing. So I love that you were a part of that. Now, kind of leading into, you mentioned how you were kind of like the 3 or 4 on that state title, state winning team, right? On the level of that. So for one, actually, there's another 2-parter for you. I've heard this before from other coaches that are in cross country and distance running. Would you mind explaining to not only myself, but to people who may not be familiar with cross country, what 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, what those positions would be?
Absolutely. So whenever you think about scoring in cross country, it's very similar to golf. Lowest point wins. So your first place person gets 1 point, your second place person 2 points, so on and so forth. Your top 5 of the individuals are your scoring points. So let's just say I was R3 and I came through 11th place. I would get 11 points. You then have 2 alternates that also run on your varsity teams. So your top 7 are your varsity. After you get to 5, if there's a tiebreaker for yourself, your team and another team, out of those 5, you then go to your alternates and they give you more points. And the least amount of points wins. So for me, we were looking at guys that were our number 1 was mid 17-minute 5K guy. Our number 2 was a couple of seconds behind him, and then I was a couple of seconds behind him. So obviously, anyone who's ever done a race knows that first place is first place, second, so on and so forth. But the points in relation to that is based off how your top 5 score.
I see. So I know you said you had 2 alternates, that are running with you. So for example, let's just say your number 6 had just the best day he or she's ever ran, and he or she ends up finishing 4th on your team, right? So let's just say, as you were mentioning, right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Let's just say number 6 ended up scoring 4 points other than traditional. Does that 6th person count as your 4 that day, or is that just if they go to the the tiebreaker, then that person would get 4 points. Is that like, how would that work if you're 6 or 7, whoever might out, or even you're 5 might outdo the person above them?
Yeah, for sure. And that's just normal. Whoever's your 4 is your 4. It's not like you go in with a planned seed and this is the person that gets, whoever runs your fastest time is your fastest runner. Whoever runs your second fastest time, second fastest runner. So really you're hoping that everyone has the best day for your, statistical point of being like, oh yes, this was our first runner, second runner. And you can plan for that. But, you plan for people to have their best days, and then people don't have their best days, and they're your 6 all of a sudden. It's like, hold up, you were just my 2. So you get that as well. But, yeah, whoever, it's based off your performance. So 1 is 1, 2 is 2, so on.
Okay. I see. Okay. So really it just comes down to whoever does well that day is what they would categorize that person as. Okay, that's fair. Thanks for breaking that down for me. So then like the other part of it was, I know you're mentioning how you went from how you were kind of that 3-4 guy traditionally. So was it difficult for you to find I know you said you had a few coaches that you've talked to, right, when you're in your recruiting process. Was it difficult to find a home not being that person? And was there like a level you were particularly looking for, or was it more of just whoever felt the best and whoever felt like home? I guess I kind of asked that earlier, but just, because of what you were looking at, was it difficult, I guess, because of that you were 3 and 4 versus 1 and 2?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I feel like my recruiting process was a little different. And I would tell this to any high schooler that is listening to this podcast, to any high school I ever talked to that I'm ever recruiting, is that you want to get the most out of your education first, especially at a D2, D3, NAIA, NCCAA, whatever conference you're going into that's not D1. I wasn't planning on being a professional runner for the rest of my life. So I knew that my education was important. I knew that my education was going to put me to my next step. And running just happened to be a way that I could do that. So I would tell any high schooler that my process was, I'm not planning on being a number 1 runner. I'm not planning on going to the Olympics. I'm not planning on, going to, Diamond League and doing all of this and getting the publicity. There is a place for that. And absolutely, if you are one of the top tier runners, that's what I would recommend. I just had a conversation with a coach from Florida, and Parker Valby just signed a $250 million contract to New Balance. And, there are places for that. So I'm sure that her college experience looked a little bit different than mine. But for me, it was about, what is the education I'm getting and how can I run here? Is this what's worth it? Was it worth the time? Is it worth the commitment? Is it worth, if there's a scholarship attached, is it worth the time I'm going to be putting into this? Because I knew that coming out of this, I was going to have a 4-year degree that I could go on. And it's more about the transferable skills that come from the sport, more so than running the sport. Again, if you're running at a D1 school, I've coached athletes that are D1. Running is your life. Your sport is your life. That's what pays for your school. So there's an importance with that. But at a smaller level, at a level that doesn't have near as much funds, that's just something to consider. And that's the place I was in.
Actually, I'm glad that you brought that up. I want to ask you about going back a little bit to what you just mentioned about how that athlete signed the huge endorsement deal with New Balance. So, obviously professional soccer and football and basketball and all these top tier, these big 4, big 5 sports, obviously team sports, I guess, they get all the money in the world because that's what people watch, right? There's a lot of revenue being gained there. But in cross country, in track, in wrestling, right, a lot of these singular sports or individualized sports, swimming, they don't get, for one, the love as much as you would hope for, but also, right, there's not that you're not going to sign a $40 million a year contract, right, being Patrick Mahomes or Tom Brady or whatever. So I guess my question for you is off of that reference is that kind of the only way that you can make money in, which I'm truly asking this because I've never asked this and I don't know, but is that kind of the only way you can make money in running is by endorsement deals, or do these like Boston marathons or these 5Ks, triathlons, things like that, do they come with a purse that you can win too? I mean, how do you make money running?
What a great question. I think it also depends on if you're going to go professional, where you're going to. There's some big name running groups out there that you can get paid to run at. Oregon Running Project is a huge one. 10 Man is another one. I mean, you can name them and they're high level, but you're still not making much of a salary. I mean, a lot of those athletes are coming out making $65,000, $70,000 a year, which is great. Awesome. That will definitely provide for you. But for the amount of hours that you're putting into just doing sport, that's something to consider as well. If you're a semi-pro athlete, you're not making that money. In the Boston Marathon, there's a purse. But if you're a runner for a team that relates to your salary, there's probably a contract there that, hey, if you run this time or you compete at this mark, we're going to up your salary $1,500. So that's the majority of it all. And that's actually been talks in the track and field, in the running world. I listened to another podcast. I don't know if you're ever going to get a shout out from them, but Magnus and Marcus on coaching is incredible. And they walk through this concept all the time, is that you aren't getting the love, but somehow you still have to make a wage. So you see a lot of times semi-professional athletes are working another job. And that's just a lot of the times the case for running, and a lot of individual sports entirely.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like, and it's nothing negative in that sense, but like even professional baseball, technically, like level 2, AA baseball, they're barely making edge meet. Now I know that they've upped the range for financials the last few years, but for the most part, for the last however many 50 half century, however many years they've had, minor ball, that's kind of what it was, is they had to, work a regular job during the day or off season to make their ends meet. So that makes sense. I appreciate you breaking that down for me, because I've never really, I don't know how you guys make money, but that's cool that they do have, bonuses and incentives if you are on that team and you do make that type of, if you're on that caliber to make a team or run a certain time, that's cool. Now I know you going kind of fast forwarding from that, you mentioned about like resources and being a Division III school, right, doesn't have as much financials as a D1. We all know that D1, right? Penn State, Oklahoma, Texas, in track and field specifically, right? Texas, LSU, Florida, right? These big, Oregon, they have a lot of money. So like when it comes to you and your program, or just Agnes in general, or D3 in general, you can answer how you'd like. Where does it sit, right? So like, is it difficult to compete with schools to get athletes in, knowing that D3 in general is different than like, there's no athletic scholarship. So you have to do a little bit of a different approach, I would assume, when it comes to recruiting. But I guess just in general, I guess my question for you is like resources wise, where do you feel like you guys sit either as a college or as a division? And is it difficult for you to compete for kids and get kids in, knowing that you're at your program plus and or the D3 level?
Yeah, you have all the good questions. So the thing
just so you know, it's come a long way. Trust me. If you came on last season, I didn't have these, so I appreciate it. That's my goal. Is I want you to have to think a little bit. I don't want it to just be bare bone, blah blah blah. I want you to have to dig a little bit.
Yeah, you are doing a great job. So the thing about D3 that is so interesting is that it cannot be a directly athletic scholarship. Cannot give any direct athletic scholarships. So a lot of schools make that work with funding. We're going to give you this scholarship that's related to leadership or something else that distinguishes you as a individual in the school. So you think about the competitive D1 programs, they're just handing out money left and right? D2 even has some money to play around with. D3, obviously, you are selling the school. So a lot of times I think about just people that are in our area in Atlanta. Emory is a top competitor in cross country. Emory has a lot more money to play with than smaller schools in the Atlanta area do, simply because they've got the hospital that they're tied to, and they've got a specific healthcare program that they can, and all of these different ways that they're getting revenue just by the amount of programs that they offer. And that's what you're selling at the D3 program, is that you're selling something very specific, something very niche. Those are the kind of athletes that you're getting. Those are the individuals that you're getting. So Emory has their entire medical school. They have their law school. They have their specific programs that sell and also generate revenue, so that they have more resources, more funding, so on and so forth. Agnes Scott, we are a small liberal arts school, historical women's college, and that's the experience that you're selling, is that you want to come and have 1,000 students on campus, a relatively small atmosphere that you can come in and make an impact with, and feel like the connection is there. We have our specific programs of interest are like neuroscience. Our psychology department is pretty outstanding. All of our humanities department. That's the kind of stuff that you're selling. But even at Agnes Scott, there's the specific things. So, and you can compare it to other D3s. That just makes it different. So you're selling the college more so. And in that, you just get to sell yourself as a program as well. But really, you are tailoring towards those kids that are wanting to come to your program and want your experience.
Right. So Agnes Scott is a all-women's college, correct?
Yes.
So does that play a factor into women choosing to go there? Right now, this is a question that's truly a general. I'm genuinely interested in this because of the fact that, the college experience may not be the same going there than it would be if they went to, even like, Georgia Tech or Georgia A&M or wherever other schools are there, right, around in that general area. Is it difficult for you to compete with girls or other colleges for these women because of the fact that they might not get the full college experience? And I mean that with like football and some of the social things that they would experience if they went to different institution.
Absolutely. We're competing with any person. I have an athlete who is graduating this year. She's graduating the next couple of weeks, actually. And she went to Georgia State because she thought she wanted a different she thought it would be cheaper. She didn't want to go to Agnes Scott, so on and so forth, right? It was a different culture. So even with that, you are competing with them. But the thing whenever it comes to recruiting is that you have to be super specific and super upfront about, hey, this is what we're offering. And this is what I can offer you as a coach. This is what I can offer you as an administrator at the school. These are the resources we'll be able to offer you. But really, this is the experience we have. And you just be upfront with that so that you aren't leading an athlete along, but you're also, not letting an athlete lead you along either with, oh, maybe I want this, maybe I'm not. You can just out front give them that opportunity.
Right. So for you, how do you recruit? I mean, are you looking at like local and then expanding? Are you looking at a certain, are you looking at websites? Are you looking at PRs across the country? I mean, obviously there's so many different, obviously you have 50 states to look into when it comes to PRs and marks and stuff like that. So, I mean, on the cross country side of things, how are you finding your athletes? And then how are you, getting them to, I guess you already talked about how you get them to come to you, but yeah, I mean, just how are you finding your athletes? And I guess how are you going about your recruiting as a coach, especially compared to how, especially since you've been through a process. I don't know if there's anything similar to what you went through or not, but go ahead and explain that to us and how you handle that.
Yeah, for sure. So whenever I'm looking at times, I mean, you're looking nationally, and recognizing that we're hoping to get the top athletes out there. We are hoping for the national qualifying marks to be there, but recognizing we're a D3 program. So knowing that we might be getting a 4 or a 5 or a 6 or a 7. That's still a competitive 6 or a 7, but they're not being looked at by D1, D2 schools. So whenever I start to look at athletes, and I mean, You even have to dabble into internationally. What are you looking at? Who would be interested in coming here? Who can afford to come here? All of those things that you look at with D3, but you also have to consider the culture of an athlete. So what I've done, and I don't know if it's the right way to recruit. I don't know if it's the wrong way to recruit. What I know was beneficial whenever I was going through school was my coach knew about the college. So after targeting 212 coaches in local Georgia area, they are all getting a handwritten letter that's going to say, outline, this is the athlete we're looking for. Do you have someone on your team that could fit this culture? That just happens to meet this time requirement that we've set. Even if not, I would love to have a conversation with them. All I'm asking for you to do is send me 4 people, 5 people, 1 person, whoever's on your team that could fit this culture. And after that, it becomes a conversation with me and that athlete. So it's really
That's cool.
Building intentional relationships with coaches that you can use long-term, because average coaching span for a high school coach is 4 to 6 years. The most that I get to talk to an athlete is 2. So There is more of a repertoire I can build there, even if I'm not at Agnes Scott. If I ended up moving to another position, I still have that repertoire with that coach or that program that extends past Agnes Scott and extends past the lifespan I would get to talk to an athlete. So the intentionality with high school coaches is really, I think, the way to go.
That's actually very unique. Granted, I don't know. I guess I have asked that question to a lot of different coaches, but I don't think I've heard handwritten letters come out of anyone's, it kept in their holster, if you would. So that's very interesting. So are these, when you say handwritten, are they like typed out that are generalized that you can then put a coach's name? Or are you literally spending time handwriting these letters, 200 plus coaches, and sending them out with a stamp and seal, and you send it out?
So my handwriting would be atrocious to read through 200 of them. I've got a letter that it outlines our program, but each of them do get an individual signature by me. That is made sure
sick.
that it's done. And they all get their address, all have my handwriting on it. The stamp is on there. Yeah, you get it.
No, that's cool. Yeah, no, that's cool. I not to discredit however you're doing it, because that takes, I think the thing is anybody can send an email, anybody can make a phone call, but I think that's just one of those things that stands out, right? Kind of sticks out, that maybe a coach will keep on his desk versus filter to spam accidentally or whatever, right? So I think that's a really unique way to catch a coach's attention. And that's actually really, really cool that that's something that you do. And that's how you go after some of these athletes and that you handle your business that way. So that's cool. So you're looking on a national scale for athletes on the level of times, sending out, personalized emails to the local coaches and to your set coaches you're trying to touch base with, and building relationships that way. So I like that a lot. I really do. So has there ever been a coach who's made an impact on your life? And if so, who is he or she and why? And now this can be more than one. Doesn't have to be just one, but in general, let me know a coach or coaches and why they were that person to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got a couple that come to mind. My first would be my mother's high school basketball coach is the man that I'm named after. Oh, wow. So he had a huge impact on my mom's life, and that influenced her coaching, which influenced my coaching. We recently went to a dedication for him. He got the school that he had coached at for 20 plus years, had dedicated their gym to him. Their new gym was built, and it's Seth A. Vining Gym. So after reading through his accomplishments and listening to how he was as an individual, that's how I wanted to be. As I looked at coaching, my mom looked at me, she goes, "Oh, you were named appropriately." I said, I sure do hope so. So I'm just a caring individual that cared more about the community and developing athletes than the program he had. And while he had success with his program, it was more about, how do I develop a community? How do I show the values and the morals that come with sport And that's the kind of coach I want to be, which takes me to the next coach that impacted my life significantly, was my high school cross country coach. I mean, he was truly dedicated to the development of a program, and that's he never lost sight of us, and somehow managed to take care of us and the sprinters and the jumpers and the throwers, and had it all balanced out, but had enough time to work on his master's degree, to work on his specialist degree, but still go on an hour and a half long run with us on Saturdays. The dedication and truly the ability to coach, and to make an impact on others and just go the extra mile. He taught me so much about that. And then the last one I can think about is that you hear a lot of time, like, you don't have to be a coach to be a coach.
Right.
My parents are phenomenal. I feel like they raised me as good as anybody ever could. And a lot of qualities obviously come from them, but the willingness to be good parents is what instilled in me the values I have, the work ethic I have, the ability to coach, the ability to communicate, knowing what to do, what not to do. And I think a lot of people discredit a lot of times what they're doing is not coaching, because they don't have the title that goes in front of their name. When in all actuality, if you're making an impact on somebody's life, you're being a coach. It doesn't have to come with, oh, I have this specification where I coach 1,500 meter runners, or you have this specification where you coach wrestlers. If you're making an impact on somebody, that's truly the coaching piece that anyone can do. So my parents are those coaches that made me the coach I want to be, made me the person I am today. And I would not be here without any of those impacts, but especially them.
Wow. Yeah. I think that parents are, as you mentioned, they are coaches without the title, right? They're coaching how to be either a good or a bad individual, good or bad this, good or bad that, right? And that's obviously the point of what we're doing as specialized coaches, is we're teaching how to be a good wrestler or a bad wrestler, a good person, bad person, right? Or in your case, good runner, bad runner, form, technique, all that stuff, right? So 100% agree. I think that they are coaches without having the title. So I'm going to assume, and I don't know if it's really assume. I know you said it. You kind of said something tad bit about how, what you learned from them and what you went through with every single person you mentioned has made an influence on you to how you're a coach today. So you're taking some of those things that you learned, right, and you're implementing them in your coaching style now. So what are maybe one or two things that you think are something that you might have learned, or something that you might be, doing now as a coach that you did back, that you got taught, right? So maybe one thing that's on the technique or running side, and then one thing that's maybe on like the mental or social or personalized, right? Whatever you want to look kind of like outside of running that you're also passing along. For
sure. I think whenever it comes to running, I think that's such an interesting take, because you never get the same season twice. And even coming in to Agnes Scott, there was an adaptation. But I think that I'll go this route. I knew what I didn't want to do. Not that my collegiate coach was terrible. He was a great guy and definitely poured into me. But he had been doing the same thing for 15 some odd years. He had been the head coach of the program, and every Monday you did this, every Tuesday you did this, every Wednesday you did this, and so on and so forth. And it was monotonous. So I knew that diversification would help, knowing that from my own experience. So I'd diversify workouts. We would try something new. It was always an experiment. So I knew that's what I wanted to take into the actual physical running piece. Whenever it comes to what I wanted to instill on people, that came from everyone who's ever poured into me. That if I put in the time and I put in, if I start the project with quality, and give it consistent quantity, give it my consistent time, give it my consistent work ethic, that it's inevitable to achieve some form of result. So if you start the project going at it 100%, you finish the project going at it 100%. And that's how I stayed with cross country. That's how I've stuck with my education. That's how I've stuck with my life. That's how I've tried to stick with relationships. So giving everything I've got, 100% of me, every time I go out to do something, was what I've tried to instill in myself and also the people that I've got to coach.
For sure. Yeah, and you mentioning how, things were monotonous. I do believe that you changing things up not only keeps kids entertained and like interested in continuing it, especially running, right? Like, I'll be honest, I'm not a runner, like distance runner. Like, I was a sprinter in track, and I say I was a sprinter. I wasn't fast, right? Like, I wasn't that guy, but I was quick for my size. I just wasn't, whatever. But like, I was never like to run long distance. So somebody who likes to run long distance, that's very taxing on the body. So kind of keeping things in perspective, I guess, changing it up a little bit, it might kind of keep kids entertained, but also intrigued and continuing to come back, right? And I think it's good for the body, right? Like nutrition wise, right? Like if you're eating on a nutrition plan for X amount of time, having that cheat meal or cheat day, whatever your diet is, helps your body actually, right? It shocks it to kind of be like, oh, these are carbs, or oh, this is this, or oh, this is that. Kind of helps shock the body in a positive way, even though it might be a bad to do that something all the time, right? But kind of doing something to where you do something completely different that the body's even used to really might benefit the body long-term wise. So I like that that's something that you implement now compared to when you were running in college. So I do like that. So I know you, at the beginning, you talked about like when you decided to be a coach and you were kind of helping out a little bit in high school, but when you decided that you wanted to coach, or was there a time in life you're like, I want to do this? Like, obviously there had to be some time where coaching was like, this is it. This is all I want to do. Yeah.
That is a story. So in high school, I pretty much knew that that was my calling. This is what God had for me to do, was to coach and to teach and like to educate people. It doesn't have to be coaching. Coaching just happens to be that aspect. But the money was not there. The money will never be there unless you are making millions and millions of dollars doing some kind of big, you name it. It's not there in cross country, just like we talked about earlier.
Sure.
And so that was a fear of mine. But I knew I always wanted to help people. So one of the things that brought me to Truett McConnell was a criminal justice degree. I thought I was going to be an attorney. Studied for the LSAT, and was on my way to law school. I was going to start the application process, and I said, this is not it. So I went and thought I was going to be in higher ed because I was in housing at the time. I was getting my master's degree, and thought I was going to be in higher education and student affairs. Wanted to go that route, helping students feel like they were welcome, that the experience they were having was beneficial and developmental. And that's how I got to the University of North Georgia, where I started my first volunteer coaching position, helping out Chris England up there. And he is doing a wonderful job with that program. And so thought I was going to be a student affairs professional for the rest of my life. Thought I was going to go back and teach and coach in high school. But I never really felt drawn to high school. I've always loved the collegiate setting just because the developmental side is these kids are out on their own for the first time. And a lot of times they need a little bit of help in that regard. They don't have their parents to always fall back on. So everything I've been doing was with coaching or in regard to coaching. And that was whenever I guess it set in, was like, I don't want to be a student affairs professional. I think maybe one day that might be in the cards, but at the current moment, it's like, I love coaching people. And I was just looking for any outlet to do so. Res Life was that outlet. Whenever I was in housing, whenever I was doing criminal justice, it was the ability to tutor kids. Whenever I was in college, I was our Vosh, like the head of the team. So I would take people and do extra practices, and I got to coach there. But I was always drawn to coaching and helping people in that regard. So it wasn't until, I guess, a couple years ago that I got really pinpointed on, okay, I'm actually going to just give up on the money side. I'm going to give up on, not the financial stability that comes with coaching, but this is what I'm supposed to be doing, and I just need to accept that. And whenever I accepted that, it has been so much easier instead of fighting it, trying to find a way to coach ever since.
Right. No, that's awesome. That your calling was something completely different, right? And I don't ever really talk like especially on here, right, or about faith, just because I don't know our listeners individually, but 100% agree that at some point you're going to get a calling, right, from something in life, and that's when regardless of financials, regardless of what the heck you thought your plan was, your plan can go a different direction, right? And so I love that you realized that what you went your whole X amount of years for, right, to study for, wasn't even that, right? It was not that, right? So I love that you figured something out because of a love and you went with it. I love that. Yeah. So I know you you mentioned North Georgia. So how long ago was this? How long have you been coaching?
Yeah, I've been quote unquote private coaching individual athletes that have come and asked me for race plans, or couch to 5K type of individuals. I've got the opportunity to coach a couple of relatively good performers since then. But I've officially been in the career of coaching since 2022. So this makes year number 2 officially. This is my first year as a head coach. So it's been an awesome getting to see every bit of behind the scenes, because there's a lot of things that people just don't recognize that come with coaching at the collegiate level, that it almost gets idealized, like, oh, that's a cush job. And I'm not going to say that my job is hard, because I love it. And I would spend hours and hours and hours on end doing this. So it doesn't make it a hard job for me. But there's a lot of things that go on behind the scenes that people don't recognize. So that's been a fun challenge to get to navigate, especially because, again, my clinical background, my understanding is in policy. My master's degree is in public administration. My background is in logistics, and understanding how people run and making them run well. So taking all of that and putting that to the collegiate coaching surface is something that's really fun, because it often offers a different perspective in the department. It offers a different perspective with other coaches, which has been a lot of fun to get to understand and to apply those perspectives to actually coaching, and taking what I learned in residence life and taking what I learned in whenever I worked in landscaping, or taking this and taking that and using those skills all towards the benefit of the program in its entirety.
So it sounds like, and that is a great segue to ask me this ask this question. So that actually, I would assume, let me not assume, I know what assumptions mean and what they do, but based off of what you just mentioned to me, the question I have is, what do you love about coaching and what do you dislike about it? Now, it sounds like what you just said to me is what you love about coaching. So what do you dislike about it? Is there anything that you dislike about it in your short time of coaching, I guess, officially, or have you so far just kind of loved every second of it?
Yeah, I think that goes back to the calling. I don't think that you're ever going to dislike anything with a calling. I mean, there are things, obviously, there's the administrative piece, and there's the politics side that I feel like only niche individuals enjoy. And if that's the case, you're probably in politics. But I think that there's a lot of those that come into play, but I don't think that ever makes me dislike what I'm doing. A lot of cross country is understanding the individual, understanding the psychology behind it. It's a lot of I can write a race plan for anybody. Anybody that has Daniel's running formula or the science of running or the lore of running can write a race plan for somebody. But it's understanding the coaching aspect that comes with the athlete. I believe in a holistic development. That whenever you come and you're an athlete for myself or Agnes Scott, or whenever I had staff members come under me as employees, that we're going to work on developing you as a person first. We're going to work on developing you for most people that I work with, because they're students, it's going to be a student second, a professional that comes right after that, and a lot of times that's tied into athletics. So whatever makes you be the best you is what's going to make you perform the best on race day. Also be the best student athlete. It's also going to make you be the best person, and the relationships that you so the holistic development is what I really enjoy. And seeing a person start off, and a lot of times we can see it by the numbers, start off running a 7-minute mile for their best mile to a 6:30 mile, right? You see those, and that's just an example, but you see the physical performance increase. But really the thing that I love about coaching is the mental increase. The ability to handle stress is different. The time management that you get is all, you grow on those things because of the experience that you get. And I just happen to be a part of that. I happen to get to offer my life experience and offer my advice. And in turn, it allows me to better coach the athlete that I have. So that was a long tangent to say that I just love working with people. And I get to do a lot of, I'm a huge statistician. The data has to prove what I'm doing, so I can give it to anybody. So I get to run a lot of numbers all day long. And you can do that because cross country is simply performance output. A lot of people ask me what I do, and before I ever say coach is that, oh yeah, I dabble in human performance. And how do we peak human performance? And that often gets people's ears to perk. But then I say, oh yeah, I'm a coach. And they say, oh, well, you didn't have to phrase it that way. I was like, but that's really what I do, is that I crunch the numbers and I look at the outputs and I look at this, and I get to be a little scientist every day that I go to practice.
Yeah. Human performance is a great term for coach. That's like the scientific term of what coaching is. I love that. So, you mentioned getting somebody from like that 7-minute time down to like the 6:30, right? And I know that seems, which 30 seconds is a lot when it comes to running. Is that more of a mental thing, blocker, that's like people are slowing down when they get to that difficult time in the run? Or is it truly a physical? I'm sure there is some physical behind it, right? Like some people just aren't physically able to run faster or whatever. But for like, you've been making plans, you've been coaching privately, right? Obviously now collegiately, and you've been around the sport. So what is the thing that differentiates or prevents a person from going from even like a 7 to a 6:45, right? That's 15 seconds faster. So that's somewhere within that run that they've got to pick it up essentially, or just not slow down. So how do you coach that? And is that a difficult thing? And where does that lie on the physical or mental side of things?
For sure. I think it's dependent on the athlete a lot of times, and where you get that athlete. So I'll just give you an example of an athlete that I coached at one point. Truly an incredible performer. He is now running at Mercer University down in Macon, and is their number one athlete. I have had the opportunity to know him for a long time. And he started out, and the training that he was doing, while he was doing the training, it wasn't to the effect that he should have been doing it. So and we didn't know this at the time, but like his long runs and easy runs needed to be at a faster pace than what he was doing them at for recovery purposes. So there's that human biomechanical, like what your muscles do. And so there's that piece of it. But there's also the mental side as well. He had a lot of walls to break through. He had a lot of things to break down, so that he could run fast. My athletes now call it the pain cave. And what the pain cave is that whenever you want to stop running fast, you don't. So you just keep running past that. And I like to call it spelunking, is that you go spelunking in the pain cave, that you figure out how deep you want to go. And that's how fast you're going to run, because all running is who can manage their fatigue longer. because naturally your body's building up byproducts. Your aerobic system starts to max out at a certain point. Your heart rate is doing this, right? And you can look at all the science behind the running, but if an athlete can mentally tough through however many miles they're running, however many miles they're racing, right, you're going to see those performance jumps as well. So there is a lot that comes with the mentality of running that makes a performance. But there's also a lot that comes with just the physical aspects that come with performance. And you can look those up online. Super compensation models are readily available. You can look at how stress impacts the running piece and how stress stimulus impacts what we do as runners. But really, whenever you want to make big jumps, it usually comes with a mentality breakthrough. For me in my own running, it was recognizing that I don't have to carry the burden of everyone else on the team. Whenever I got to college, I felt like if I had something to prove at the race, I was going to mentally psych myself out. So I had to come at the race looking at it with no stakes, and that I'm just going to go out and do my very best. And typically that would result in a PR. But it's also the fact that I don't have to run with everyone else because I know my training's different. And it's just learning that with each athlete. So I don't know if that answers your question, but it definitely is a little bit of both.
Yeah, no, it does for sure. Now, like I know another thing that plays a factor into performance in running, and really I would assume really any sort of sport that at least initially, I know eventually you become acclimated to it, but like altitude, right? So like somebody who might be running in Colorado or Utah or somewhere that has relatively high elevation, right? And they're running this, let's just say, go back to that 7-minute mark, right? They're running 7 minutes in this altitude. And then they transition to running at sea level in Georgia, which I believe most of Georgia is sea level. I could be wrong, but I believe most of it is. Right. So they run the exact same race. That 7-minute there might be because of their fatigue level being a little bit lower, or I should say breathing is a little bit easier for them, right? So oxygen moving through their system, that might go 3, 4, 5 seconds. It may be more, they might run the same thing. So like, are you looking for athletes? Are you looking for kids who might be running that time in high altitudes to try to get them to you as well, just because you know that is a at least for them to come in immediately and might make a second or two PR? Or however many that might translate to. And does altitude matter to you when you're looking for an athlete?
Yes and no. So I will definitely recommend altitude training, but you never know how a body is going to perform to it. Athlete that I was talking about earlier has never done altitude training. I've definitely recommended it to him, but there's just not a means to do so. So what I'll tell you is that one other thing that I'll say is that humidity is the poor man's altitude. So we do a lot of humidity training down in Georgia because you're right at 800, 600 feet above sea level at the most, unless you're running on the Appalachian Trail. So like you're not seeing huge spikes in that. Altitude for me, I went out to New Mexico and did 2 weeks of altitude training at one point, and I had a great response to it. But there are some athletes that will go out to altitude and get sick as a dog because their body just reacts to it in that way. I think a lot of times you'll see athletes make a jump from running at sea level to altitude because it does make that effect because the air is easier to breathe. But that's not the case for everybody. So whenever I come to looking for athletes, it all depends on really for right now, it's the culture fit. But after the culture fit, it comes down to performance. And if that performance is at altitude or if that performance is at sea level, if that performance is in the dead of cold or if that performance is in the dead of summer, my job as a coach is to adapt to that and understand how do we improve that athlete even without those conditions. So I know that's the inadvertent way to answer that, but I think that whenever I consider it, yes, it's definitely a consideration, but I don't think that should ever be a coach's end-all be-all just because an athlete has hit this mark at this time versus an athlete has hit a different mark at a different time.
Right. So you mentioned just now you touched on culture. So what is your culture there, and how do you build this? How do you get kids to buy in that mindset? So I guess the proper way of asking this is, what is your culture? How do you build a successful culture? And then how do you build that successful culture on the level of buy-in and mindset?
Yeah, for sure. My culture is one of which that we value hard work. We are going to come out and we're going to do the work every day. And you know, as you look at that, it also becomes the culture that the team needs, right? Stepping in as a first-year coach, and I'm the fourth coach to come in 4 years. So recognizing that our seniors haven't had a consistent coach, haven't had a consistent person pouring into them, they just needed standards. And these are the standards that I would set, but these are also a conversation that my team and I would have. So I came in week 1 and we immediately had phone calls with every member of the team before they got on campus. As soon as they got on campus, we were having team meetings about, hey, what is it that we want out of this? How are we going to make an impact here? What do we want our culture to be? And they almost derived the culture. I have my mindset. I have what I bring to the table. And that's coming in hard work. You're going to get a consistency with me. You're going to get an intentionality. That is what I try to bring. And you're also going to get a support system. Like, I'm here to support you in all your endeavors. I've got an athlete right now who is also playing piano. So I try to go to her recitals, and I have an athlete right now who is doing her senior seminar, and she's an English major, so I try to go to her readings whenever I can. And it's all about the support culture. Whenever developing buy-in, that comes with them, and that comes with, what do they expect of me? Because if I don't have expectations set by the team, how could they expect for me to hold them to standards? And so it comes with a buy-in on, here's our mission statement that we set as a team. Here are the things you all wanted. Here's what I had in mind, and let's adapt these together. And there's also a leadership balance there, is that I tell them all that we're all rowing the ship. I just happen to be the one that also gets to call the shots while we're rowing the ship. Is that, we're all on equal playing field. And one thing about the beauty of higher education and coaching in college is that these individuals that I'm coaching are also getting degrees that should be able to benefit our team as well. That they should be able to pour into each other because they're learning to specialize in something. I've got some neuroscience majors, and they bring in a lot to the perspective of, how does this affect our mentality? I've got some psychology majors that throw in, and they say, well, maybe we should think about this and how it affects our performance. And, that the team comes in and buys in together because they recognize that I don't have all the answers. I'll do my research, and I'll do the best research I can to get those answers. But that the culture is that we're all in this together. High School Musical, man. That we are all pouring in to achieve the same
together.
Goal. Yes,
that is a crazy reference. I've never heard I haven't heard High School Musical reference in a long time. Okay.
I coach girls.
Oh, touche. I gotcha. Yeah, that's funny though. That's true. We're all in this together. The family's supportive. You want to support them and what they like to do outside of running, just like they supported you by choosing to come to you and run for you, right? And so that makes sense. It's a two-way street on the support system. And obviously, I would assume and hope that they feel comfortable to come talk to you about things that might be going on, as you mentioned a while ago in this episode, about how they're transitioning from being with mom and dad or whomever their relation, whatever they're going on in high school, right? They've had for 17, 18 years to now on their own solo dolo. You're the person that they trust, and that family trusts to take care of those athletes, both on the track, or excuse me, I guess kind of on the track, but on the when running and when competing, as well as classroom and what the heck they're going to be in 4 years or 5 years from now. So I love that. So the question I have for this now, because you have only been coaching for a year or two, right? So this question, I want you to answer however you want. Okay. So the question is how do you build a successful program on the level of wins? And then how do you sustain that? Now you can answer that however you'd like, either as what your plan is going to be, or how do you think you do that, right? Or how have you done it in the past with individuals, or however you want, because you've done individual and coaching at the college level, you might have two different perspectives or whatever. So answer how you want. I just wanted to kind of lay that out because you can answer how you'd like, but how do you build a successful program on the level of wins, individual, as a team, and then how do you sustain that year in, year out?
Absolutely. I think that comes from, number one, empowering athletes, because a lot of times an athlete won't see everything they can accomplish. And as the coach, I can either get way too visionary about that and say, well, in 4 years, this is what's going to come, and I'm going to try to get you that point. And it's also thinking long term. You have to think in chess pieces, not checkers. That I want you to be successful now, but I got you as a freshman, seeing you be successful. But how are we going to look in 4 years too, and balancing that? So I think a lot of it also comes down to making individual success, especially in the sport of cross country, is that we have to champion individual success, because if an individual is successful, they're going to pull the rest of the team up to be successful. But that doesn't change the fact that as a program, we should all be minded towards the same thing. Our goal going in this year was that we wanted to have a specific place in conference. And that was our goal all year long. We're going for this team. We're going for this team. I put specific meets in place so that we would compete against those teams, so that they would know, they would be ready. And it was a mentality that was there that we can win and we want to win. And the biggest thing about coaching at the collegiate level is that, and for most coaches in general, is that we're never satisfied with now. And so it's building a legacy that, if I'm with Agnes Scott tomorrow, I want them to be able to continue under my leadership. If something else comes my way and if it's better for my family, if it's better for my culture, if it's better for this, that, and the other, right? After making that decision, will Agnes Scott be able to keep the legacy that I instilled there of success? Mm-hmm. This year we saw we had a historical team finish at conference. We're the fastest team to ever come through at Agnes Scott. And really that came through because of a mindset piece. In my personal opinion, and this is not to gloat, but there were no freshmen there. There were no recruits coming in. It was individuals that had been on the team for at least 1 year. There were no freshmen. It was all upperclassmen. So it was mentality that they wanted to win, and I instilled in them the confidence that they could win. And so they all performed better. Everyone had at least one personal record for the season. And then outside of that, they were all more confident walking around campus. They had pride in being a cross-country runner, which affected their mindset coming to practice, which affected their mindset coming to meets, is that they had a confidence that they had not known in a long time, which was super beneficial. And I think that's what attributes to your success, is not thinking about how we're going to win today, but what is the legacy that we're going to have, right? And how are we going to continue that wherever we go? Yeah.
Well, I think that I know you said you don't want to gloat, but I think it's really, really cool whenever you can say that, that success was under your watch, right? From whatever it is, whether it's away from running, while running, if it's a mental thing, physical thing, whatever it is, right? A lot of the times, especially whenever it translates and shows at the conference, or in your case, right, regionals or nationals, whatever the level is, right, when that happens, it's a cool thing. And so I understand that, I can respect that you said not to gloat, but it just feels good. So I understand where you're coming from, and to kind of go back to what you mentioned about I guess in general, how you want to build that legacy, right? I think that's, I don't know, if you don't want to have a legacy of success as well as just being a good coach whenever you leave, right? It's right. Like I want to leave a dynasty, right? I don't want to leave a dynasty. Don't get me wrong. But if I have a dynasty built up of success, right, or at least consistency of showing it, right? We might not win a national title every year or state title or whatever, or conference title. But if we're top 2, top 3 every year, or we get to that point from wherever we are to there, and we keep that consistency, like that's just the expectations, right? And so yeah, I 100% agree that that's a big piece. At least I believe that to continue that and to have that now, but also in the future, is a key piece of coaching, right? At least everybody wants to be successful, right? Coaching, wins doesn't necessarily mean that you're a bad coach. It also doesn't necessarily mean that you're a good coach, right? But at the same time, wins and being successful, it feels good, right? It feels good no matter what. So that leads me to my final question that I've written down, at least that I traditionally ask. It's my favorite question. I do have a fun question after to kind of finish up the episode with you, but this is my favorite question, and it's the name of the podcast. It's the coach's why. So, why do you coach, and why do you do this? What's your coach's why?
Yeah, I knew this question was coming, and I'm so glad that you asked this. The whole reason I was excited whenever you asked me to come onto the show. So give you some background about why. Just the word. Simon Sinek's books start with why. It's the most watched TED Talk of all time. It's 18 minutes, 26 seconds, I think. I listened to it on repeat one summer. And it was essentially, people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And I took that and I applied it to my life. And so my why statement is more than just my coach's why. There are different tweaks that go into each bit of my life, but my why statement is pretty consistent with this. I want to create an environment that challenges mindsets and supports growth while setting higher standards as the norm and not the exception. That's my why, is that I don't want people to be satisfied. I don't want people to be comfortable in complacency. I want people to recognize there is so much more to give, and that your standard, you shouldn't be playing on an 8-foot goal if the standard is 10. You shouldn't be worried about
he's spitting right now.
You shouldn't be worried about, what everyone else is doing if you're not giving your best. My mom just retired from being a elementary school PE teacher. And the one thing she says whenever she opens up the gym is she says, give me your best. That's all she asked for. She said, now there are the rules of the gym. There are the rules that are part of the team, but I ask that you give me your best. And that whenever people give their best, that challenges their mindset of what they think they can do that day. It challenges how much output they think that they can bring. It supports them growing because it challenges how much they can grow, how much they think they can grow. Whenever you look back on top of the mountain and you look at everything that you climbed through, you recognize, oh my gosh, I've grown so much. And that moment is why I do what I do, is because people get to look back and they say, I've climbed this mountain and I've conquered whatever the task is. If it's running a sub 25-minute 6K, then it's a sub 25-minute 6K. If it's that I manage my stress so that I can handle everything else I'm doing in class, then that's what it is. But being a coach is creating that environment that challenges every day, that makes you better every day, that makes your standards higher than what everyone else is because you chose to be an athlete, because you chose to be this person. And that whenever you give your best and that you set yourself to a higher standard than everyone else, you're bound and determined to be exceptional. So that's why I do what I do.
That was, I like it. I love that. Yeah, that's a very, very good why. It's not what you do, it's why you do it. I love it. Damn, that was very good. I love it. If you guys are still listening to this podcast, if you're on YouTube, make sure you guys HTB, hit that bell, like, subscribe, all that 9 yards. If you guys are an audio listener, PocketCasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, whatever, make sure you guys leave a review. Hit those stars. Say what you got to say, but whatever you say with your chest because we want to hear it. Coach, I have one more question for you. What is the best state for high school cross country in the United States?
Oh, the best state for high school cross country. I am biased to Georgia because I think we have the hardest work ethic and we've got to deal with humidity all year round. Oh, but Texas has some competitors. All of the Northwestern states are, I mean, it's just so different. I don't know if you could pinpoint one. And of course, you can look at national average times and say this is the best or whatever the case is. I think I've got to go with home, but that's all I know. I've got to go with home just because the humidity here in the summer is pretty atrocious. I mean, it's nothing compared to Texas. But, I mean, just the fact that you get so much out of the state of Georgia. You can run flat. You can go up to the Appalachian Trail and run technical. I ran a race one time that has 9,000 feet of elevation gain. So, I mean, like, you can get it all here. So.
Okay. So, Georgia, the home state, bias. Hey, sometimes you got to throw the bias out there. Sometimes you can obviously call out other states, but sometimes if you actually are competitive, it's okay. I respect it. I don't know much about cross country on the level of that. I will do my best to dive into some cross country at some point, and then next time we get you on here, or maybe whenever that time comes, I'll just do a list of my whys on why these states are the best. But I appreciate it, man. But I've already said this to you before, Coach, but I really appreciate you jumping on here. I thought it was a really, really good episode. You gave me some information I wrote down, and I'm definitely going to implement. So I appreciate some of your gems and some of the stuff you gave me, and I'd love to get you back on here at some point in time for sure.
Yeah, for sure. I appreciate the opportunity.
Of course, man. Of course. And if you guys are still listening, I appreciate you guys so much. With that being said, we'll see you guys next time. Peace.